Hello and welcome to another episode of the M42 Adventures podcast. I am your host, Rick Trimmer, and today we have a gentleman by the name of Hugh Vail. I love the name. Sounds like a superhero or maybe a villain. Maybe a villain. Very unique name, Hugh Vail, and don't know much about him. Basically, I know that he loves horses and the outdoor adventure lifestyle. And he is a friend of Chase, right? He's a friend of yours? That's
more of a friend of my sister's.
Friend of your sister's. And so that's how I got referred to him. And he's going to come into the studio today here in southern Utah and record with me. So we're going to jump into this conversation with Hugh, and we'll take it from here. So, yeah, what's up, man? How's it going?
Good.
Is this your first podcast, or you been on others?
I've been on a couple others.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're an OG at this.
Yeah.
Now, just to be fair, Rick doesn't really know much about you. I mean, he knows like a little bit.
I was actually just going to make sure it's Hugh Vail, right?
Uh-huh.
I love the name.
And then,
Sounds like a superhero.
right? That's what I said.
Or a villain.
Whichever.
Which are you? You?
Both.
But yeah, it's a cool name, man. I like it.
Dig it.
But yeah, I do not know much about you. It's been, you just said you work with horses.
Uh-huh.
You have a cowboy hat.
Uh-huh.
So I put two and two together.
Yeah.
I told you about Mustang medicine, but yeah.
Yeah. You told me that. Yeah, we'll get into that. So welcome. So you're from St. George, or where are you from?
Well, I grew up in Southern California,
Okay.
mostly. But
As a cowboy?
No.
I was going to say.
No.
That's
My grandfather was a cowboy and a psychologist, and I would go and live with them in the summer times. And so I had an opportunity to go and ride horses. And I think it was a combination of two things. It was being with the horses, and it was also being with my grandparents. And that became, it was just a place of safety for me. Home life was pretty rough, rough. I think is probably a good term for that. And my grandfather, even on both sides of the family, my grandparents were always a place of safety. My dad's family was out of Santa Barbara, California. My mom's family was out of Idaho. And so I had an opportunity living in California and growing up there to be in Santa Barbara a lot. In fact, we lived there for a couple years. But being able to travel over to Idaho, there was just something that, I don't know, it just felt different there. And
that's where their place was in Idaho?
Yeah, my mom's parents. And so maybe the combination of him being a cowboy and also a child psychologist, he probably could work with me.
Sounds like the perfect grandpa.
Yeah.
Man, that's like,
Totally.
yeah.
So that felt good, being there.
And I'm similar to that. I mean, as far as relating to that, I grew up in Vegas, and my grandparents lived in Payson.
Arizona.
No, in Utah.
Utah.
Yeah, northern Utah. And same thing, it was just my place to go. I did not like Vegas. It was not I lived in Cedar City till I was 8. And we went down there, and I was just like, this is horrible. Way too many people. And so when every summer I'd go up to my grandparents, and it was just my happy place, And so I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful thing that you had access to that.
Yeah, and I was able to ride horses, almost daily. And if we weren't riding horses, we were fishing, and so those became my two. That was just all I wanted to do. It's probably all I want to do today.
Yeah,
still the same.
Sounds great. Yeah, I those are perfect. So, how old were you then? When was that? What were those ages?
I mean, I was going to my grandparents' house and we have pictures of me. I was a toddler, out there on their horses, and but when it like really got serious, where I was like saddling up my own horse and going out a bunch, I was 12 years old.
Sounds a lot like your childhood. You guys were always going over to grandpa's, right? And was it your grandpa that had the property here?
And he raised Appaloosa, bred them and stuff. But he wasn't very nice.
He wasn't. He did not do. He didn't take the psychology class.
No. So it was.
He was a traditional cowboy.
Yeah, he was hardened, so it was different.
Yeah.
But he had his insights to life and stuff like that, but they were hard to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's kind of two camps of owning horses. It's like you've got the horsemen and then you've got the cowboys, and it gets a little complicated and pretty nuanced when you get into it, because there are some phenomenal cowboys that do the real cowboy lifestyle, and they're horsemen. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, you've got horsemen and then you've got people that own horses, right? Mm-hmm. And they have the cowboy hats and
the weekend warriors.
Yeah, and even if they're riding every day, if they've never really worked on a really great ranch or been exposed to that lifestyle, it's so easy to use force and manipulation in getting the horse to do what it wants or what you want it to do. And so there's a principle that exists in both camps of being with horses, and it's what they call pressure and release. So a horse doesn't learn by the pressure that you put in its life. So imagine like putting a bit in, here's this metal thing in this horse's mouth, and then you've got this rider who's going to crank on the reins. So that's, if I want to go right, you can pull the reins to the right. So here's this pressure that's in this horse's mouth, and that pressure is not what's teaching the horse. It's when the horse surrenders to that, and then you release the pressure. So pressure and release. The release is what teaches the horse. So then they're hunting for that release. So if I pick that pressure up, they're like, I know how to make this go away. So they're going to yield to that pressure. That's
interesting. That kind of sounds like we just had Dan Peterson on, who's a child not a psychiatrist, but therapist.
He's a specialist, but yeah.
And he was talking about that as well, how kids react to reward.
Yes.
We were talking about like SeaWorld and the whales.
Uh-huh.
And he was telling us how they train those whales, and they put a rope underneath on the bottom of the pool. Mm-hmm. He says to get a whale to jump 20 feet, they start with a rope on the bottom of the pool, and when the whale just happens to swim over it, they reward it.
Uh-huh.
And then it swims around over here, and then it happens to go over it, and they reward it. And then they raise it and raise it and raise it until it's level with the pool, and then they're looking for that reward. You're not beating a whale. You're not,
that's not
that doesn't work out. So that's interesting. I've never thought about that with horses, that you think it's the cranking on them, but it's them wanting the cranking to go away.
And the pressure will get behavior. You can force behavior, but when you start speaking the language of horse, you'll see these horses that'll come through, and I've had people that, the thing that I specialize is in creating mountain horses. I like being able to get out into the mountains and being able to have a horse that can handle himself. I can put him anywhere. I can leave him tied to high lines all night long, and he's not losing his mind. So that kind of horse is going to do really well in all the other disciplines. So whether you've got a horse that's doing English riding or a hunter jumper or anything like that, they still need to develop their emotions. And so people will send me their horses, and I used to do this a lot. And you can get that pressure to get the behavior, but these horses would show up and they'd be shut down. And so these horses, whites in their eyes, and you're going to like extend your hand out, and they're just bracing for, and so the pressure will get the behavior just like you can with a child. You can you can intimidate the child. You can force your will on him. But if you can get that child or that horse or that other person to be choosing in, then all of a sudden you're starting to develop a partnership with this other being and this other creation that now you're both hunting for the release. You're both hunting for the reward,
like you said.
Yeah, pressure when out of balance is essentially punishment, and release when in balance is positive reinforcement, which is the opposite. So you've got kind of two philosophies or two theories of punishment. So I'm gonna behave correctly to avoid the pain that's coming, or positive reinforcement is I'm I'm going to seek and find what I need to do to be able to show up and create the partnership, because there's reward that's coming. And so that old traditional cowboy way of doing it, I mean, they're living a hard life. I'm going back to like 1700s, 1800s. They're living a really hard life. They don't have the time to sit there and build this partnership because, winter's coming or whatever pressures that they're under.
Or the knowledge, maybe either. Maybe they were never.
Yeah,
a lot of us are taught, by our elders,
passed on.
and so I mean, maybe it was just lost. Where they didn't know what they didn't know.
I had some amazing horse people, like a horsewoman and a horseman, come into my life that one guy I spent 6 months with, and that always felt to me like there was things that I learned there. I'd still be working on it, and I wouldn't know. And then I had a chance to ride around with this amazing horsewoman, and the year that we spent together doing her clinics and helping, I honestly felt like I could have spent decades and would have never come to arrive at that, because it's hundreds of horsemen along the way just passing on that stuff. And
well, that's a big thing that we do here, with our mentors, and that's why you're here, is because, I just don't have the time or to learn what and you can come on here and you can spend an hour and months with people and teach them stuff that is just so invaluable,
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a mentor, I think the only thing that we're left with is trial and error.
Right. Yeah.
And trial and error is going
takes
to be
a while.
like 10 times longer.
Yeah. So you're up at your grandparents'. When did you? Is this? I guess to go back a little bit, because I don't know much about you. Is this your job? Is your business horses? Then what do you do for a living? What do you do?
Yeah, my business was horses. I was always trying to. I was just trying to find ways to just spend more and more time with the horses, and so I started doing trail rides, mountain adventures, and then that transitioned into, I think I was finding more of myself when I was out with the horses and out in the outdoors. So then people would come over, and we'd be chatting about life and trying to share things. I'm trying to like help them with their marriage or whatever. And I could never articulate it really well, but I would be like, just come with me out to the back pasture and let me just work with the horses. Like, I can't explain what the hell's going on in your life, but I can translate that if a horse were having these same kind of difficulties. And so I would go and do these demonstrations, and then they'd be like, that's like me and my wife.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I'm trying to crank on, and I'm trying to force my kids to do this stuff. And then they would send people over. And essentially what happened is I was able to start doing like coaching and like putting a curriculum together. So I went into positive psychology. This is the study. Instead of pathologizing people, they said, well, why don't we just look at all of their gifts and their strengths? And so you've got these virtues and you've got these character strengths that make up these virtues. And I built a whole program for coaching based in positive psychology. They have 6 virtues and 24 character strengths. And I put together this 6-week program, and then all of a sudden that just brought in like thousands of people and kind of went from there. And so that's still what I do today. And now the curriculum is extended out through, if anyone's familiar with Dr. Gabor Mate and Carl Jung, I married Gabor Mate and Jungian psychology together to be able to repair the relationship that we have with ourselves, and then let that be an extension to how well all of our other relationships are going. And I just happen to use horses as the medium to be able to teach those things. So you still use
horses to do all this. So your 6 weeks is with horses. So they come out to a location.
Mm-hmm. And now people are coming out for 4-day immersives where they just come out and spend 3 to 4 days. Some people will come out and like they'll do a lot of work, because a lot of clients are just on Zoom. And so we get all the lessons, the IQ, the foundation set, and then they'll come out and spend time with the horses. you've got to have the reason I broke it up that way is because you have to have the IQ, the understanding, to then have the application. And that's what Aristotle talked about as wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to know what's the right thing to do, when to do it, what, like the right reason to do it. And he had these 6 things. The Greek word is phronesis. So there's these 6 filters to being able to have wisdom. And that's different than knowledge. But I'd have a lot of people coming in, they're just like, fix my problem. And I'm like, you don't have the wisdom to be able to fix your problem. And this is why we can listen to podcasts and read books and everything, and then the same shit keeps repeating. These same patterns keep showing up in our life. And so when people are really wanting to break the pattern, that's when they come out and visit me and the horses. But I want them to be able to go through the online curriculum so that when you're here, I'm not just throwing all these terms and
yeah, it's like a prepping them for the class. It's getting ready.
Gain the knowledge and then learn how to
that makes sense.
use it in your
and then
life.
you can actually apply it at home.
So where's the school at, or what is it? What do you call it? A school or a
We call it an
ranch?
academy.
Academy.
Yeah.
Where's it at? Is it here in Southern Utah?
Yeah, we base everything 30 miles north of here in Salt Lake, at a place called Homestead Ranch. So I've been there for about 3 years now, and that that's been a
Up here in Baker, like
yeah,
that's
right next to Baker Reservoir.
Oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. I know the homes. Yeah, we were talking about them on your podcast, right?
Yeah, you know,
They don't own that. They don't own. They actually did own it, and then they sold it.
They sold
and then
it.
He died in a fire.
And then the new owner,
That's crazy.
yeah,
Holm,
passed away.
Holm, right?
Yeah.
HOLM?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. I know where that's
Yeah,
at.
he was the one that originally built it out. The ranch is really phenomenal. It's over 100 years old, and
Oh, I didn't
so
know that.
so when Monty purchased it, he had a vision for his company, and he built 30 different little cabins, and there's these cool little wagons. The wagons are actually my most favorite place to stay. It's the only king size bed we have.
It's in the wagon.
Is in the wagons,
Yeah.
and when they
Big wagons.
when they built the wagon, the company that builds the wagons, they build it, and then before they put the canopy
Canvas,
or the canvas over the top of it, they actually have to drop in the king size bed, and then they enclose it so that thing ain't coming out the door.
Yeah.
You think that?
I just went and stayed at those in East Zion with my I have 3 little boys.
yeah.
And it's amazing. It's cool, man.
They're
It's just-
super cool.
Yeah, I was just laying in there and I'm like, this is hilarious. We're in a wagon.
Yeah.
But they love
When
it.
it's windy, it's like a little annoying because
Yeah.
the canvas is flapping around.
Ryan was there like a week before me, and he said it was Ryan Mickler, our partner, and he said it was really windy, and he's like, it was pretty creepy, man. It was different, but it was amazing.
Yeah. I
I didn't know they had
they're
those
cool.
there at Homestead.
Yeah, they've got 2 of them, and then I bought 2 teepees and put like 2 legit teepees that are there, and then we threw some beds in there, and then people would come and they could opt in for that, and
That's awesome.
that's like super roughing it.
Yeah, that's cool though.
There's dirt on the floor. And
Yeah.
That's where it's at right there.
yeah,
Yeah.
But I love it because one of our teepees is big enough. It's a 22-foot teepee, and most Native Americans, their home lodge would be like 12 feet. So this thing's like double the size. But you can get a good little fire going on in there, and we have a little liner in there, and
That's
it'll
awesome,
hold
man.
it'll hold the heat. Like it'll be 0 degrees outside.
What's the most people you had in there?
How many people have we put in there? We probably put 20 people in there.
I've seen the little gathering, so I'm just
Oh
asking.
yeah.
Yeah, we probably jam in like 20 people.
Yeah.
As many want to come in there and fit
Looks
in there.
fun.
Yeah, it's super cool.
So that's where you're doing them now, is up there. So you have horses there. There's horses on site.
Yeah, there's horses that are on site there. That way, we've got an agreement with the resort, and it fills up their bookings and their beds. And we've now done. I started doing about 2.5 years ago. It was maybe 3 years ago now. I started doing these 4-day immersives, and we'd bring in like 20, 30, 40 people at a time, and be able to do different workshops with the horses while they're also learning the language and learning about their nervous system, learning about the unconscious patterns that they have that continue to show up, in their life, which is very Jungian psychology. And most importantly, I think that was so helpful for me in my journey, and I've tried to pass this on to other people, is the understanding of emotions. And, it's it's like I didn't know what the difference between my emotions and my feelings were. I had a therapist ask me, so what are you feeling? And that just got me thinking, like, are we talking about a physical sensation, or are we talking about an emotion? And I couldn't answer the question. And my answer was like, not good. Like,
Yeah.
the typical dude.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
good. And if it was a good day, then I was feeling good. That was about it.
Simple.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
But horses have the same thoughts, feelings, and emotions that humans do. They have the same part because the limbic brain, and this is the same thing going back to the whales. They all creations they have a nervous system, and so therefore in the nervous system and in the limbic system is where your emotions reside, and so your emotions are being driven by the biochemicals that are. It's like a combination of the biochemicals that are. So if you've got dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, but then you mix in some adrenaline, and you've got a bunch of different neurochemicals, and those essentially are composing the physical sensations in the body. So, for me, like when I was experiencing fear, I didn't really know I didn't know how to label what that was. But when I learned that, fear for me is usually like my stomach feels like it's got butterflies. So I could identify the physical sensation in there. Well, those butterflies are coming from neurochemicals that are being produced, in the endocrine system through the glands. And so those neurochemicals are hitting different parts of when I'm sad, I always feel it in my elbows. I have no idea why I feel it in my elbows, but when and my elbows will feel, and like my arms, like right here, they'll feel almost hollowed out. Like think about the way I would describe the sensation is like injecting it with helium. It feels like there's like nothing there. There's no strength, and it just feels hollowed out. And so then when I identified that for me, that's where sadness was starting to show up in my life. So then I could go, oh, well, now the emotion is sadness, but this is the physical feeling that I'm having. So I started to learn the difference between the feelings and the emotions. Well, what really helped me was the horses, because horses have the same limbic system that we have. So thoughts, feelings, and emotions all are composed out of the limbic system. Now, telling a story about those feelings and those thoughts, that's what makes us human. That's what we've got, the prefrontal cortex, which essentially is about 10% the size of our brain. And that is, they call it the storyteller or the figure outer, right? It's like, I've got these emotions and I need to figure out, how do I make it go away?
That's where you reason.
How do I get more of it? It's our reasoning, functioning skills. Horses don't have a prefrontal cortex. I mean, they do. It's primitive. It's like the size of a little, our little pinky fingernail. So they can't really figure things out. And what it does is it makes them Zen Buddhist monks. And so they can just accept the moment. I don't know if you guys have ever read any of Eckhart Tolle, but it's about the power of now and being in the now moment. And that what's robbing us is when I'm ruminating on the pain of the past, or when I'm tripping on the anxiety of the future because I don't want the future to repeat the pain of the past. And so that's pulling me out of the now moment. And so if I can get into the power of now, then I'm here and I'm fully present. And that's why guys are hanging out at the top of the mountains in orange jumpsuits for, 30 years trying to figure that out. Or they escaped prison and just didn't have anywhere else to go.
I like how that's how you described a monk.
Yeah,
That's funny.
Orange jumpsuit.
Orange jumpsuit.
Ninja suit.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
So I started figuring out my own feelings, my own thoughts, my own emotions, through working with horses, and it made sense to me. And then as I would articulate and present this to other people, it was like, people were like, my therapist never explained it this well. And I don't think it was that I was explaining it better, is that I had a model.
Yeah, right.
That I could just tell you, like, okay, when the horse is feeling this, and when he does this with his eyes, these are his emotions. And then I could put stimulus into his life. I could put a challenge into his life. And one of the things that where the horse's power is in their feet. Like, and it's the same thing with the elk and the deer and everything that's hanging on the walls in here. You take away the feet, and they don't have any. They got no mobility, so they have no power. I mean, You look at the limbic system, when it is dysregulated, it goes into four basic states: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Right? In other words, like herd dynamics, just follow the other person. And so if you take away their feet, you're essentially shutting those dysregulated reactions. And horses, I mean, they don't want to be vulnerable like that. They don't want to give you their foot. They don't want to have their foot get wrapped up in a bunch of barbed wire that's out in the mountains. And so they'll panic, and then they make the situation worse. So when I was bringing in I had an amazing horseman and other horse mentors for me, and they were like, tie that foot up in a really safe way so that horse, he allowed to move and to process those big emotions that are coming through in a safe arena, so that when he deals with it out in the real world, he's not going to panic. He's like, oh, I've already been here before. So we were essentially teaching horses emotional intelligence, right? It's like, here's these emotions, you're going to feel them. Now here's what to do with them. And that gets brought down into two categories: is emotional regulation and then emotional maturity. So it's, what are the tools that I have when I'm feeling these big emotions, but then how do I,
use it?
How do I use it? Yeah, and how do I put it? And horses have to learn the same thing, because that's all the function in the nervous system. The nervous system's here to just try to keep us alive. But the nervous system doesn't give a shit if we're thriving. The nervous system just stay alive.
Yeah.
And so then
exist.
Yeah, just exist.
Yeah.
And so when you can develop the emotional intelligence and the emotional regulation skills and the emotional maturity, now you can start thriving in life and not just existing, because now I've got the emotion, but I know what to do with it, and I've got tools to navigate. Horses have to learn the same things. So that just felt to me like, okay, this can start helping my life. And then as my influence just naturally was out to my inner circle and to my friends, then that was positive for them, and then they pushed it out to their. I should have turned it into a multi-level marketing, but I wasn't that smart at the time.
Oh man.
Say we had Monty, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. I am turn my phone off. It keeps vibrating. Man, that is a lot. That's a lot of information right there. I'm sitting there like,
I've got
I
an
felt like a
online
horse
academy.
the whole time.
He's like, if you want to know more.
The whole entire time,
Yeah.
I'm like, I think my frontal lobe is that size, because this is.
Well, I'm sitting here.
I was like, am I the horse in this situation? Am I?
I don't get to have these conversations very
Holy
often.
cow, man, that is deep. There's a
Yeah.
lot. There's a lot there. That is a lot to unpack. So, yeah, that's crazy.
This is the first time he's ever been speechless.
Jeez. Yeah. It's just so deep on so many levels that it's there's a lot to unpack on that one.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you go back, the oldest book that I'm aware of, and I've been told that this is the oldest book in horsemanship, is called The Art of Horsemanship, and it was written by Xenophon. And Xenophon was like 2500 BC. He was, a Roman general and he's probably equivalent of what we would think of as like a general who used to be a Navy SEAL, so he's a total badass.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And he wrote the book called The Art of Horsemanship. And so much of that wisdom that's getting passed on, he was trying to capture and write down. Well, they talked about that. He's just got so many gems that are in there that it's like the horse is the mirror to the soul. So if you want to know yourself, well,
Look at your horse.
then look at your horse. If you want to know the man, then go ride his horse. And
Which makes sense. I mean, it's obvious, because the way it's learned or reacting is how it's been taught.
Not a knock against your grandfather or anything. And I've had horses where I've screwed it up too, because you're just trying to learn and you don't have anything. You can't learn it on YouTube, and if you can't afford to go get a mentor and a trainer, then it's like, good luck. But I bet you if I rode your grandpa's horse, I'd see all kinds of holes inside the horse's development.
His breeding stud was named Runner for a reason.
Yeah.
He just take off. He just fly off the back.
Yeah.
You're like, what just happened?
Yeah. And whenever a horse, we look at that as like, that's a horse you don't want to ride, right? It's one that's going to buck, bolt, bite, fight, kick, do all these things. And we look at that as maladaptive behaviors, but it's actually not maladaptive behavior. It's just that horse cannot regulate his emotion. And so when he's got this big emotion and say the emotion is fear, he doesn't know what to do with it. So he's like, I got super powerful muscles, and so I'll just run from my problems. And so then he bolts, and he's never had to turn and face it. But if I'm riding grandpa's horse and I go to reach down and like move those reins, it doesn't matter how slow I go. If he's associated, maybe he's been hit, he's been punched or something like that. I mean, that horse is just going to brace. And then all of a sudden I'm starting to see the man. And I'm like, oh, when things get difficult, then I see
punch.
that
Somebody punches you.
that you punch, that you hit, that you get frustrated that way. And so I can see a lot about the man just because of what I'm seeing in the horses. And if you know dogs, it's the same way.
Yeah.
If you hang out with kids, all of a sudden you can start seeing just what the environment at home is. And that's just the nervous system getting programmed and conditioned to be able to function at an unconscious level of what feels safe and the reactions. Yeah, exactly.
Man, that is, that's.
You probably didn't know you could go here with horses, did you?
That's what I'm sitting here thinking. I thought we were going to talk about like riding a horse and,
Well,
how to saddle it.
In this conversation, I feel
How
like
to,
I finally understood why they call it breaking a horse. And that's not necessarily a favorable term, like,
right.
But in the essence of what my grandfather did, he was definitely breaking.
Yeah, that's
horses.
right.
So
yeah. Well, and I've heard about all the boys' homes and girls' homes that have horse therapy and stuff
the
like
equine
that.
programs. Yeah.
And I just thought, being naive, I just thought it's being around a big animal, watering it, feeding it, brushing it. Wow, it goes deep.
Yeah,
it goes way deeper than I ever thought.
Yeah, it'll go as deep as any Jungian psychoanalyst could ever take you. Like it'll follow you into that depth, and that's because you're still working with the nervous system and the limbic system. What makes it a little bit more challenging for humans to learn our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions and not be driven by that or be running from them, or bolting or biting or fighting, is that we have the ability to slow it all down and to get conscious and to get present and to become aware of what's going on inside of us. That's coming from the prefrontal cortex. And so it does make it hard for humans to actually gentle their nervous system. It's much easier for a horse or for a whale to do that because without a prefrontal cortex, they're not getting in the way of telling stories.
Right.
They don't have to figure out why I'm tied to a tree right now.
Right.
You tie me to a tree all night long on a high line, and I'm like, did they not like my beard? Did I buy Sitka and I was supposed to buy the other brand?
You're right.
I'm telling all kinds of stories to try to figure out why is this happening to me.
Yeah.
Well, if I was abandoned by my father or abused by my mother or whatever it was,
Those get deep.
I'm still sitting there 30, 40, 50 years later, still trying to tell that story and figure it out. And then I'll land on a story and be like, this is why. And that story doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be factual.
You just wrote it.
It just has to help me make sense of what the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions are going inside. And so horses don't do that. They literally don't have that part of the brain. So when you're working in these equine therapy programs, you can go back to me tying up a horse's leg to help him learn how to process that. Once that horse stops running around and he just sits there, he's now made peace with it.
Right.
So he's like, okay, good.
He's not thinking about the past or the future.
He's not thinking about the past or the future because that is what...
It's solved.
It's solved.
Humans don't solve it.
We don't solve it. We have to consciously get into it, and we have to then remind ourselves.
Make it a habit.
Yes.
And build and reinforce.
Yes. Yes.
That's interesting.
And if we're not aware of what's going on, that original story, whether it's true or not,
It's bigger.
it gets bigger and bigger. It gets stronger and stronger. It gets deeper and deeper.
And
And
eventually it's
It's like we were talking with Dan
Then it
about.
is
It's the it's like imprinting.
Yep.
You download that message.
Yep.
He was talking about children, and he says if you tell them they're dumb all the time, well then they download that, and then to pull them out of that years later through therapy or whatever you can do to help them.
I love that it's downloaded.
That's what I said. I says that I love that word because that for some reason just triggers me to think my son's downloading this. He's taking it in and it's rewriting his code. And I'm like, whoa, that for some reason I like that word too.
Yeah. Our very first module that we have in our online academy is called the Programmable nervous system.
Yeah.
So if it's programmable, it's downloadable.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we named it the Programmable nervous system for that exact reason.
Yeah.
Right there. And a lot of people don't understand that those stories that we're telling.
All right, guys, let's step away from this conversation real quick and talk about a few things we have going on with M42 Adventures. First off, it's the new year. Everybody's got big goals, big plans. And one way that I think helps people to achieve those goals is through mentors and accountability. So we have our online community called The Genesis. And we just announced a few weeks ago that it is going to be free for at least the first 6 months of 2025. So if you're interested in coming in, joining these like-minded people, we have just under 100 people in there now. We have 7 mentors teaching everything from finance, self-help, spirituality, self-defense. There's just so many in there. Firearms, all these
relationships.
Relationships. Yep, all these different things. So if you're interested in that, go to m42adventures.com and sign up. Again, it is free. You don't have to enter your credit card. There's no strings attached. Check it out. Second, we have a big giveaway that we're going to be launching here in the next week or two. You do have to be a member of the Genesis to win that. Again, no purchase necessary, but that's going to be amazing. We're going to get that up pretty quick here. So keep following us. Continue to pay attention to that. And then we also have our expenses for this year. We have sold out most of them. We have Africa, some spots left for South Africa still, and we have some spots left for Hawaii. So if you're interested in either one of those, again, get inside the Genesis. That's where all things are happening. I can't tell you enough about it. Get in there, sign up, and then we can talk personally. So that's it. Let's get back to this conversation.
Stories that we're telling, and we're trying to make sense of the thoughts and the feelings and the experiences that we've had. They are conditioning us and programming us, and then I'm not aware of it. So therefore, that is a program that is running true inside of me, and the nervous system's going to do one thing. It's going to cause it to be true in my external world. And if my external world isn't proving it to me, I will make my external world. I'll start to sabotage my relationships so that you do get mad, because I need you to be mad, because if you're mad, well then
you're vindicating what I think,
what I believe, and what's this program that's downloaded inside of me.
It's also when you start like looking for, you're going to buy a yellow Jeep. And you go see a yellow Jeep, and then you drive around town, you see 50 yellow Jeeps. And it's like, they're everywhere. It's like, no, now you're just looking for yellow Jeeps. It's like if you write that, if you start believing that you're dumb, everything you see is going to confirm that you're dumb.
Yep.
And to rewrite that in a human, like you're saying, good luck.
Well, it's one of those things, too, is like, Dan was talking about, and I feel this on a deeper level just from the aspects of dealing with PTSD. But when I was going through it, there was a huge thing that I had to separate myself, because whenever the therapists tell you and stuff like, you're suffering from PTSD, and it's like,
now it's labeled.
I have
it's
PTSD,
labeled now.
so it becomes a part of who you are. And it's like,
yeah.
No, I don't have that. It's some symptoms of something that I'm dealing with, but it's not something that I actually have.
It's a cold.
And so it's like, you're not dumb. You're not none of these things. It's, even if you are unintelligent in that moment, you can learn and be better. I mean, it's an ongoing process, but. Yeah, it was hard because you take that in. Once you release that and you realize it's just a thing, it's not a part of you, well easier to deal with. So
Yeah, I mean, post-traumatic, right? There's a big difference between a traumatic experience and trauma, right? The traumatic experience, trauma, to get to the root word of it, trauma in the original Greek means wound. And so
I don't think I'm qualified to interview this guy.
it's fine.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Hugh.
just say
Make us all feel
great.
dumb.
Yeah, no, it's good.
To the
So
root
we're
word
going
of
to Greek.
trauma.
We're in Greek now. We're going to go off Delphi Maxims next.
Horses.
Yeah,
horses.
we can talk
Horses.
about saddling a horse.
There you go.
Yeah.
I need some
We dumb
refreshing.
this down a little bit, Hugh. All right. Okay. So trauma. What's the
Well-
root word of trauma?
Well, a traumatic experience is just an adverse experience, right? But what it's saying is like a woundic, right? Traumatic just means wound, so it's just an adverse experience. And so what all the science is now discovered is that trauma is not the event that happened, and this is really hard for people to wrap their head around because if you think about any adverse experience, whether you're abandoned or abused, betrayed, the trauma is not the experience. The event was traumatic. It's the state of being wounded, but that's not what the trauma is. The trauma is that after post experience, what I made that mean about me because it happened to me. So it must have meant that I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable enough. I'm not cared for enough. It's all the not enoughness. And then that story is now trying to figure out why that experience took place. And that story then gets put inside of my psyche and says, this is a true story. And now I have trauma, right? But actually just change the story and change the perspective around it. And so now it's if we could change that, and this is what Jungian psychology is all about, is changing the perspective that the thing that happened to you actually happened for you. And if it now happened for you, well, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a wound that came, but if there's a wound, then there's healing. And one of the big, I don't want to say mistakes, but one of the big things, it was like a big aha for me, because we all have wounds. That's the human experience. But I always thought in my wounds, they want to be healed. So my wounds aren't getting healed. My traumas aren't healing, right? And to be really cliche, it's like my traumas aren't turning into triumphs. They're just repeating themselves, And the wound doesn't want to be healed. The wound wants to be wounded. That's what
It's almost like
that's
death.
the nature and the essence of it. Healing wants to be healed. Healing doesn't want to be wounded. And so now I'm left with a choice. Did this happen to me or did this happen for me? And if I can now not gaslight myself, but actually start to see what are the values and the virtues and the benefits this has made me into, well, I can't do that unless I have tools. And if I have no tools, then all I'm left with is an old story that I'm just trying to make it make sense. And so to your point is that this has also been a critique that's happened in as good as the 12-step program actually is, there's a significant amount of data that's coming out that's critiquing it, because you have to go in and what's the first thing you have to say? I am an addict, right? That's I am an alcoholic. And now you're making this I am statement, and then you're telling your this thing now has got to be true inside of you. And it's like, no, addictions are the most human thing that you could actually experience. Addictions are just simply me trying to numb or make the pain go away. Well, if you heal the pain, the abandonment wound, the betrayal wound, the rejection wound, well, then there is no pain. So then if there is no pain, do I need that glass of alcohol, or do I need that line of cocaine, or like whatever it is? It's like that thing is just trying to mask or trying to numb or trying to. You
got to get to the root of the.
You got to get to the root to the root of the problem. Anyways, you were about to say something.
I don't know. I can't remember now. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to
Say something smart, Chase.
Yeah,
You're
I
making
love
us look
horses.
dumb. I got nothing. So, do you have the root word of anything?
No, I don't actually.
Come
Especially
on,
not in Greek. But I mean, I love,
You
I
let me
feel like
down,
I'm watching
bro.
a documentary at this point. Like,
Yeah.
like at some
It's
point, like
crazy.
we hit some levels of some, wisdom that I'm going to be really happy for people to watch. But they're going to be like, I was watching an M42 Adventures podcast,
Yeah.
but I love it. I feel
Yeah.
the same way about Dan.
Yeah.
It's just, lots of information.
Yeah, that's wild, man. You're a smart dude.
I mean, I dig,
Not
the,
you, Chase.
the aspects of you growing up with a grandpa who was, a psychologist and a cowboy. That just boggles my mind a little bit, because I mean, the hardened cowboy that I've always known in a psychologist, like I don't know how they would mix. So I would really be.
Did you?
And he was a child psychologist. I mean, and what I mean by that is that he was really gentle.
And that's awesome. And a cowboy.
Yeah, that's weird. That's like an oxymoron.
I know. But imagine
that
what that would be
exists?
like to be
I don't
taught
even
by
know.
someone who is
Yeah. A nice cowboy.
like a tough person, tough enough to live in that world and in that environment, but be soft enough.
Yeah, I think cowboys get a
deal with
bad
children.
connotation of rough. I mean, it's a stereotype. It's
Yeah.
most of them are pretty accurate, but I think it's cool to see one that is gone beyond that and said, "Hey, I can be this," and I think it just pulls people in, like as you have. You've a lot of them. They don't invite you into their world. It's almost scary. But when you do,
And it is scary. I mean, you hang out with some legit traditional cowboys. I'm like, that dude's going to spur me.
yeah,
Like,
I
yeah,
said the
gets
wrong
scary.
thing. I'm gonna go to sleep, not wake up.
yeah,
yeah.
And he won't think twice. He'll go right back
Yeah.
to sleep.
This was actually a thing I didn't like about I could never get into the series Yellowstone because it had some of that,
Right.
so much of that aggression and so much of that violence. And I'm just like, I know it exists, but can we move on from it? I mean, good Lord.
There was
Yeah,
also
yeah, yeah.
those crazy parts of that peace and that gentleness, even with people that he had to kill. Like I was, there was areas where I'm like, I get that a little bit, but also he had to live a certain lifestyle in order to prevail in his.
yeah. We actually just watched it, me and my wife, just recently.
Yeah.
And and I was a lot like that too, where I was like, it gets to be a little much.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you're tough, Rip.
It's
Yeah,
We get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think Casey's the best.
Yeah.
He's
He
the
is.
best character.
Yeah, I did too.
I mean, and it's cool because my background is in training wild horses, and so I was getting all these text messages like when Yellowstone first came out, and they were like, "There's this dude, and he trains wild horses," and some of my best friends are in former military and Green Beret and Navy SEALs and everything, and then Casey's character is this super kind, gentle, really good horseman who happens to have been a former Navy SEAL, and
Yeah.
I was like, that's actually the best dude in the show.
Yeah,
Definitely.
he was.
Rip just has a cooler hat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is mean, but somehow just puts up with Beth.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah,
it's
we
a
just
very-
finished it like 2 nights ago, and it was where Kevin Costner, like, he just died, right? They just got rid of him quick because of the whole
Yeah,
issue.
they got all that drama going
But
on.
he was there at the grave, him and Rip, and I'm like, what's he gonna say? This is gonna be profound. The guy raised him, and he's like, see ya when I see you or something. And I'm like, well, that was a letdown. Like, show some emotion, Rip.
Yeah.
Like that was your opportunity, bro. But they can't give that.
Nope, it would ruin the character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. No, man, that's wild. That is not what I was expecting. You should have given me a little more background. I could have looked up big words.
I tried,
Set them randomly. Give me a root word, Greek
No,
word.
I was really excited for this because me and Hugh had the opportunity to talk over the phone, a little bit, when I first started. Obviously this was a lot of different small conversations. But when he started talking about the philosophy of what he does with horses, I was like, this is mind blowing. I'm like, we're going to have some fun here. So I didn't know how deep it was going to go. I mean, his knowledge is far further than what I expected, but at the same time, magic.
Yeah, it's really cool to see because we're obviously our experiences. We had an experience here at my parents have a ranch in New Harmony.
Oh yeah.
And so we brought 33 people out and we did, shooting guns and bows and riding horses. Who did I interview before? I was trying to remember his name.
Which one?
He's from Hilldale.
Oh, Dale.
Dale Timpson?
Tipson. Is that his name?
Yeah, I interviewed him in the very beginning,
Yeah.
like a year ago. Good dude, good guy.
Yeah.
And he brought some horses out, and you know, just a year later and having this conversation, it's like, whoa, it can go way deeper.
Oh yeah.
It can go way. So it'd be cool to partner up and do some stuff together to where, you know, it's just like you said, because what we're trying to do is get people outside, which you're doing with the horses and you know, the outdoor adventure part, but then work on them. You know, I think that's where I love that you're connecting. I was thinking of it more like if you ride a horse, you're happy. I am.
No, that's good.
That does happen.
I like it.
You know, most of the time. Sometimes I've been in a pretty bad situation where I'm not
Some
happy.
people are frightened to death while they're on the horse.
But
Yeah.
man, you can go so much deeper, and I just never been exposed to that.
Yeah.
You know, I did not know there was a book written 2,500 years ago. That, you know,
can totally tell by the
4,500
cover,
years
too.
ago.
Yeah.
Crazy.
What a wild. So how did you just? I know we're getting towards the end, but I just want to know, how did you? So you were. What did you do before this?
Yeah.
You didn't just go into this?
No, I mean, it was definitely.
I mean, I know you're drawn to horses, like you said, and it just kind of. But how did you make that transition? You know, what were you doing before?
So I was working with an organization that rescues children from child sex trafficking. And we had a rotation schedule, and we would fly to different parts of the world. And the rotation schedule would generally be 1 week on, 1 week off. And so when I would come home, me and the guys that I was working with, we would always.
Were you in California at this time? Or?
No, I was up in Utah.
Okay.
Yeah, or in Salt Lake.
Okay.
And just one time we were coming home, and the founder of the organization, he said, "Man, I got to go home and I got to like bathe in Clorox." And that kind of became our thing. Is like, okay, now we got to go home and bathe in Clorox, because you're just exposed to these things that I didn't even know existed prior to that. And kind of my Clorox bath was always to go home and I'd ride my horses. And I got this, like, I'm inspired and energized by people, and all my great downloads come from people, but I have to have what I call mountain time, where I have to go away, and I got to be total lone weirdo out in the woods and just go do me, right? And for me, that was always riding horses. And the darker the night, the longer the day, I loved it. And what happened is something really interesting. I guess it probably ties the whole interview together, of like, we would go out and we would visit these kids. And I witnessed something that was really, really interesting. So when a child gets rescued, 50% of them have to go into what they call an aftercare home. And an aftercare home is a home that cares for them after the rescue. And the reason that they have to go into an aftercare home is because about half of all children that are trafficked from their actual home. So you rescue a child, and then you can't send them home because that's where you got trafficked from. So these aftercare homes exist, and we would go and visit some of the aftercare homes if they were in the area that, in the country that we were traveling to. And aftercare homes are funded. They're generally nonprofits, and they're funded from the public, from whatever source that the aftercare home can do. And so the rescue operation team, we would have a gal that her job was to say, okay, we're going to do this rescue operation, and let's say we're going to rescue 20 kids or 10 kids or whatever. Then they've got to get an aftercare home set up prior to the operation, goes down. So for those children that actually stayed in the aftercare homes, we would go visit them and follow up with them. And this interesting thing started happening is met so many of these children, and some of them were exactly what you would expect them to be. They were depressed and they were sad, and you just kind of thought, like, I hope they make the turn. I hope they they figure it out. And of course, if they don't, like, of course you can't.
Yeah.
But then there was these other children that, like, I swear they were raised in Disneyland, and they just are like the happiest kids you've ever met. And they're living in a third world country, and they've
been abused. Yeah.
And this thing, we were in Haiti one time and visiting this aftercare home, and this kid, I mean, I still have him, this is years ago, but I still have his photo on my phone. He's just like this happy kid. He's like, yeah. And it just is it's a photo for me that when I am struggling kind of in my shit, I will often pull that photo up, because he's just like the definition. It's like joy is just exuding out of this photo. Well, his story is pretty dramatic and traumatic. And I saw this other child who was very depressed. And not that you would ever compare, but this child had not gone through the same things that this child, and this child was so joyful. And that, like, it was that moment that, like, the record skipped in my brain. I was like, the math ain't mathing. Why is this kid happier than, like, me?
Yeah. Right.
Like, what the hell? And so that goes back to trauma is not the event that occurred. It's what you made it mean about you. And so this kid just had never made anything mean about it. And he just had that ability. Whatever the therapy sessions that he was going through, it's somehow that clicked really well in his mind. And so the point being is that we would come back home, and for me, I would go, and it would just bring up so much stuff in me. I'm like, these deep questions. I mean, I ended up reading where I got all the trauma or the Greek words from is I ended up coming home, and at the time I was very into organized religion. And that was a place of safety for me. It was like, if I could just church harder, then I would be enough, and I'd be safe. And church was like a drug for me that made all my wounds kind of go numb for a little while. And if those wounds would start surfacing, my abandonment wounds and my betrayal wounds and my rejection wounds would start surfacing up, I'd just go read more Bible, and I'd just go, like, sacrament harder. And
it was your addiction.
And it was my addiction. It really was. And so in that addiction, when we were out traveling, it would bring up a lot of stuff for me. And so then I would go to my drug of choice, usually the New Testament, and I decided that I was going to read the New Testament in the original Greek, and then I was going to retranslate it out. And so I did that.
Whoa.
Oh.
That is you are addicted.
No, I dig it.
You went deep down the hole, bro.
Well, it kind of reminds me of, like, the Thomas Jefferson Bible. Like, he went through and cut out all the parts that were miracles so that nothing was phantasmal about Jesus, and took all of his information, put it in French, something else in English. So, he basically cut out everything, pasted it all back into a new book. But, like,
It's brilliant.
I mean, it gave him exactly what he wanted from it. And, similar with you, but, some people reach for things that are, look, kind of crazy to us.
You wanted to do that to get to the like the beginning, but like it was originally intended.
Yeah, I had questions that were surfacing up inside of me that I couldn't find answers to. That just didn't feel sufficient for me. And I believed that the answers were there. I just felt like I must need to go deeper into it. And so, yeah, I went and did that. And
did it work?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. As an example, I share actually quite a bit in, like, our retreats and our events and coaching and everything, is they say that Jesus' best sermon that he ever gave, or anything that he taught, the best was what they call the Sermon on the Mount. And that starts in Matthew chapter 5, and it ends in Matthew 7. But it's only like the first verse or the second verse of chapter 7. So it's really just Matthew 5 and Matthew 6. And if anyone's familiar with, you've got the Beatitudes. So blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And you've got these Beatitudes, and that's how the Sermon on the Mount starts. But then you get into chapter 5, verse 48, and in the King James Version, it says something really interesting. You've probably heard this before. It says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." And I've heard that my whole life. And so my interpretation of just a dude churching at church is I'm reading that and I'm like, be perfect. And my interpretation, unbeknownst to me, my subconscious interpretation is be flawless, even as God is flawless. Right? That's essentially how it's translated. And I think it's how most people translate it. When I started retranslating from the Koine Greek into contemporary English, that made the best sense to me, because the King James Version is from the 1600s. And when I got to that verse in verse 48, this was my translation, and I did a word by word, and then that doesn't read well in English, and so then I took all the English direct translations, and then I captured what I felt was the essence of what those English words were saying. And a lot of times what happened is Greek is a language of brevity. You have one word that means like a paragraph. And so then you're trying to translate that into English, but you got to put it in so many pages of a book, because you can't capture that, because then the book's this thick. And so then so much gets lost in the translation. And so the essence of Matthew 5:48 is it's own your wholeness, realizing you are complete, lacking no parts as you are, even as God. And I had this profound moment where I was like, perfect in the 1600s meant wholeness, not flawlessness. And so I get to be human while simultaneously, so in other words, I get to be human in my wounds while simultaneously being whole in my divinity. Right? Because it was Jesus who said the kingdom of God is within you. And so, it's like, well, where does God live? It's like, well, he lives in his kingdom. That's why they call it the kingdom of God. Okay, well, where's the kingdom of God located? And Jesus is like inside of you. So it's like, okay, well then in the Lost Gospel of Thomas, there's like 96 verses to this. And in the third verse, it opens up and it's like, it's Jesus talking. It's like the original Pinterest account of Jesus. It's just a bunch of Jesus quotes written by Thomas, right? And Thomas asks Jesus, he says, where's the kingdom of God? And Jesus says, if you think it is in the sky, like if you think it's above you, then the birds precede you because they fly. And if you think it's below you or in the sea, then the fishes precede you because they can swim in that environment. But I tell you, Thomas, that the kingdom of God is inside of you and it is outside of you. And so it's a unique part where it's within you and it's outside of you. And so both simultaneously exist. In the book of Luke, when Jesus is asked by the Pharisees, where's the kingdom of God? He only says it's within you. It's only in the Lost Gospel of Thomas that you see he's also saying it's also outside of you as well. And the point being is that that I'm a nerd and I read a lot of and do like a lot of nerdy things about this. And so I'm out and I'm traveling and I'm coming home and I'm trying to answer some deeper questions within my soul and what this job is surfacing up inside of me. And yeah, the way that I try to answer some of that is I'd go on horseback, and then I'd bring my Greek concordances. I mean, I'd spend a couple $1,000 buying so many different, because I didn't speak Greek, at all. And so I mean, one verse would generally take me like, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to take 60 to 70 minutes to translate one verse, because I had to go through each one, and then I'd read all the different ways that you could interpret that Greek word. And so an example of that is Matthew 5:48 is to own your wholeness, realizing you are complete, lacking no parts, even as God is that way. And so are you. And then I looked at the whole full context of the Sermon on the Mount, and in the Sermon on the Mount, he's saying, you've got these beatitudes. You could be this way, but you can't be this way until you can own your wholeness, realizing you're complete, lacking nothing. And so you have to be able to realize that it's all outside of you, but it's also all within you. And when you're outsourcing it's like it's all outside of me, then it leaves me empty. But Jesus is trying to say you have to see that it's all within you as well. And when you can like really realize that, then your wounds, is Dr. James Hollis, who's the current director of the Carl Jung Institute for Education in the United States right now. He's like, if Jung was alive, like maybe Dr. Hollis is this today for us in our society. And he proposes a question. He says, the question is not whether you have wounds. All of us have wounds. The question is whether you have the wounds or the wounds have you. And when we don't even know what the wounds are, well, they've got us. Yeah. And they're running these, this is why patterns repeat. And we wish that we'd get different results, and we just don't understand it. It's because I don't even know what my wound is, and it's got me. And it's subconsciously driving and my conditions and my downloaded programs that I've got. And so I was just trying to piece all this together, and I was seeing my own wounds inside of me. And the way that I was able to really translate it all into application in my life was through the horses. And that was where it came to
full circle.
That was where the rubber hit the road, so to speak.
And then you just thought, I want to share this. It changed your life. So now...
Yeah, and people were like, you have a really cool way of like explaining and using the horse and then articulating, and you're smart and you know the words, and you can bring people in from all kinds of different walks of life. So, but to go back to the original question, what was I doing before this? I mean, I was out with that organization, and they were out rescuing the children and from sex trafficking, and that just ended up bringing up a whole bunch of stuff for me over the years. And then I was just taking mountain time on my horses, reading Greek New Testament.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Trying to make it all make sense.
Yeah.
I can imagine my wife, not to compare, but my wife was a 911 dispatcher for 6 years. And she'd come home all the time just questioning everything, just things you go through. You're going to try to put it together, and it sounds like that's what you were doing. And that's wild, man. That's a wild story.
That is a wild story.
So
I love it, dude. That's a lot to process.
It's a good way to end the day.
Chase says it'll be about horses. I'm like,
I got this.
I know horses.
I told you, it's therapy.
Yeah. Oh my heck. Well, is there anything else you want to add?
I could go on forever.
Yeah,
so
I could listen forever.
yeah.
So, what's
I
your
won't
academy?
get it all, but I can listen.
How do people find you in your to do your therapy with your horses?
Yeah. So the organization that I created about 8 years ago is called Mustang Medicine. Mustang, like the wild horse. And I had an executive from American Express come out to one of my workshops, and she pulled me aside afterwards, and she was like, I gotta let you know, I was terrified to be around the horses, and I didn't know what I was going to get into, and I didn't have a name. I was just getting contracted out by all these different events, and there's like, I don't know, do your Hugh thing, and
Do your Hugh thing.
yeah, and I was like, okay, I'll do that. And anyway, she pulled me aside, and I was at the time trying to figure out like, what is the Hugh thing, and how should I label this and call it? And she said, I just want to give you the feedback that she said, your Mustangs are like medicine to my soul. And I was like,
That's
Mustang
it.
medicine.
Yeah.
So mustangmedicine.com, Mustang Medicine on Instagram. And then we have our own virtual community where you can come in and go through all of our courses and
Right.
and everything. And that's Mustang Medicine as well. And
Yeah, I love
Awesome.
it, man. That's very, very enlightening and eye-opening. So, yeah, I'd love to do something down the road together in some capacity.
yeah, absolutely.
Go for a ride.
Yeah, that's probably, the
There's
best for
some
you.
incredible rides. If riding through Snow Canyon State Park is really beautiful. Riding up above at the Red Mountain Trail, and if you've ever been out to the Lookout and doing that out on the horseback is incredible. And it's so much easier because they do all the hiking. And
I did
so,
a dinner on the Lookout. It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to do a breathwork class out there.
That'd be legit.
And I'm gonna pull in about 15 horses, and everyone will pay a couple $100 to come out. But we'll go out to the overlook, and then there's a big sand pit. If there's a certain spot, and the community's built this really cool campfire pit out there, and so I want to actually do a holotropic breathwork session. If no one's done that, that's the thing that you need to really experience and utilize the breath, and have that experience with horses tied to the trees, and bring up the music and
Yeah.
do a full breathwork session in the overlook. And
Yeah, let
Let's
me
do
know
it
when you do
together.
that. I would
Yeah.
love to. Yeah.
I'll come cook for it or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, let's do
Absolutely.
something. Put something together.
Okay.
And I'll join as a
As a participant.
yeah. Yeah. I know how to breathe.
Yeah, right. And ride a horse.
Probably not the right way. Like
learn.
Rick, you idiot. You
You'll be
mouth breather. You mouth breathing son of a gun.
Oh man.
But no, I'd love to come out, man. That was that was interesting. That was wild. So I appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, thank you.
Taking your time to help people. I think it's going to be very eye opening and yeah, I don't have anything else to say.
I'm very impressed with your ability with Rick.
Yeah, I don't get dumbfounded very often.
He's usually talking a lot. during this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I literally was listening to him talking. I'm like, think of something smart to say. I'm like, I got nothing. I'm like, I don't even know what is. Yeah, geez, that was You took it to another level.
yeah.
Thanks, you.
Awesome.
All right. So there you have it. That was not what I was expecting at all. Chase had told me his name is Hugh Vail, and he is a cowboy, and we're going to talk about horses. And that is not what happened, Chase. That was a very, very interesting conversation. That was not at all what I was expecting. As Chase said in there, it's not very often that I am speechless. That was a very intelligent conversation and over my head, to be all honest, and can't get those words out. Shut up, Chase. Yeah. So a very interesting conversation, very cool person. Hopefully you learned a lot from that. That was a good, it just shows me what is possible out there when you think that, like I've thought we're going to do these equine therapy, 3-4 day adventures on horses, and the therapy is being on a horse outdoors. But there's so much, it goes so much deeper on how you can look at a horse and how a horse reacts and how we react and that connection. And so I'm going to go back and listen to this one a couple more times and really take some notes, because I felt like I was just in way over my head on this one. But thank you, Hugh, for coming out. Appreciate that. Again, you can reach Hugh at Mustang Medicine is his company. And hopefully we can do some stuff in the future with them. I am excited to partner up with M42 Adventures and do some collaborations here, because he's obviously a good soul, a good person, a deep thinker, somebody who I would like to spend more time with and get to know better. And always, with horses, why not? Just that much more of an adventure. So Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast today. If you did, please like, share it, tell your friends, help us get the word out. We need your help. That's how we grow this thing, and we'll catch you on the next one. Have a great weekend.